Racist white cop throws 18-year-old black woman off cliff, unaware. She's the FBI director's daughter. A white police officer was publicly rejected in front of a crowd. And 72 hours later, he threw an 18-year-old black girl off a cliff. But he had no idea. She was the daughter of the FBI director. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. On June 4th, the sky over Lucasville, Texas, was crystal clear, without a single cloud. The cicadas buzzed through the old oak trees, and on the athletic field of Lucasville High School, more than 600 locals gathered to witness the graduation ceremony of the final class of the 2024 to 2025 school year. Standing on stage under the midday sun was a young girl, Agnes Happer, 18, the class valedictorian and daughter of a widowed former attorney of high repute. Agnes represented her class, delivering an emotional speech about hope and her dream of leaving the small town behind in search of a more just world. But before her speech could finish, Sheriff Clayburn, 43, the man regarded as the most powerful figure in Lucasville, suddenly stepped onto the stage. In his gleaming police uniform, he approached Agnes, pulled out a glittering ring, and got down on one knee to propose in front of hundreds of people. A wave of oohs echoed from the bleachers. Some students giggled. Some parents rapidly snapped photos. To them, it was a romantic surprise proposal, but Agnes stood frozen, like a stone. "I'm a person, not a prize for this town." That was all she said. Just one sentence, but it struck directly at Clayburn's ego. He rose to his feet, his face red with fury, his eyes burning. The entire schoolyard fell silent for a few seconds, then erupted into murmurs, whispers, and even some mocking of Agnes for being ungrateful. In Lucasville's conservative white community, rejecting a powerful white man, especially in public, was nearly seen as treason. A teacher in the front row whispered to a colleague, "She just dug her own grave." A student reporter had filmed the entire moment. The 17-second video was uploaded to TikTok at 12:32 p.m., and within just 30 minutes, it had 140,000 views, spreading to Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook. The hashtag #She Said No began trending across Texas. As the town buzzed with gossip, Agnes quietly walked away from the schoolyard. No friends, no family by her side. Every step echoed against the burning concrete. An elderly teacher, who had once taught her mother, followed her and whispered, "You shouldn't have challenged him. Around here, he is the law." Agnes said nothing. She simply gripped her Princeton scholarship folder tighter and walked forward, as if she already knew that ahead of her was not summer, but a coming storm. No one there, not a single person, could have imagined that just 72 hours later, Sheriff Clayburn would stand atop a 40-meter cliff and shove Agnes over the edge, thinking he had buried his shame and wounded pride forever. But he had no idea. Agnes not only survived, she was the daughter of the FBI director, who was now heading toward Lucasville with the fury of the entire nation behind him. On the night of June 7th, the town of Lucasville fell into a deathly silence. No moonlight, no barking dogs. Even the wind seemed to stop. Agnes Happer, who had become the center of media attention, had not appeared on social media in over 24 hours. No messages, no calls. No one noticed, until Ms. Monique, the neighbor next door, heard the screech of brakes and a muffled scream at 11:43 p.m. The young girl had been followed, not by nosy reporters, but by two men in uniform, Officers Ronnie and Elias, Sheriff Clayburn's loyal enforcers. They didn't knock. They didn't need a warrant. They broke the lock, stuffed a black sack over Agnes's head, zip-tied her hands with industrial plastic restraints, and tossed her into the trunk of a black Chevrolet Suburban. No license plate, No dashcam. The vehicle sped out of town, barreling down the red dirt road toward the hills of Broken Ridge, where there was no cell service, no homes, only thick woods and jagged cliffs that had claimed many lives over the decades. As the SUV drove, Ronnie looked back and murmured, "She shouldn't have said no to him. Now she knows." At the peak of Broken Ridge, the fog curled like ghosts. Clayburn stood waiting, cigar glowing red, right hand resting on the grip of his holstered Glock 22. Agnes was dragged from the vehicle, still hooded, hands tied, her feet nearly dragging. When the sack was finally pulled off, her eyes went wild under the glare of a flashlight. "Now you're gonna learn a lesson about limits." Clayburn's voice was low, cold, and steady. Agnes screamed, tried to back away, asking in desperation, "Why? Why are you doing this?" Clayburn didn't hesitate. His answer was just 3 words. "Because you're black." In that moment, every accolade, every praise for her academic excellence, her resilience, her future, was shredded by the brutal sentence of a man wearing a badge. Agnes struggled, but Ronnie held her arms tightly. Elias stood behind, acting as lookout, expressionless. Clayburn pushed hard. No gunshot, only the roar of wind in her ears, the whipping of branches against her body, and finally the heavy thud disappearing into the darkness. Agnes vanished from sight. Clayburn turned away. His cigar dropped to the ground, its ash scattering. He looked at Elias and sneered. "No one's gonna remember that girl. Trust me." The SUV left the scene within 3 minutes, but down below, among the thick brush and icy stream, Agnes Happer was still breathing. She wasn't just alive. She was about to become the nightmare that racists like Clayburn would never forget. Agnes woke up at dawn on June 8th, deep in a forest with no signal, no voices. A burning pain surged through her body. Her left eye was swollen and purple, her jaw scraped, 3 ribs fractured, and her right knee torn down to the muscle. She didn't remember how long she had fallen, only that a thick branch as wide as a grown man's arm broke the fatal impact. Then she tumbled into a dense thicket and finally rolled into the icy stream at the bottom of the ravine. That night, there was no rain, but the forest mist soaked her clothes, dropping her body temperature dangerously close to 35 degrees Celsius. She crawled to the gravel shore, her hands bloodied, lips trembling from the cold. At one point, she truly believed she would die there, just another nameless corpse in a town that didn't want to remember. But Agnes didn't die. With a miraculous survival instinct, she broke a branch and fashioned a splint, tore her shirt to wrap her knee, and used her hands and elbows to drag herself through brush and thorns. Every owl hoot, every crack of a twig behind her made her flinch, terrified that Clayburn and his men had returned to finish the job. But what Lucasville never expected was that the girl they thought to be a silent victim was writing her resurrection from the shadows. Nearly 10 hours later, as the sun rose and beams of light pierced the eucalyptus canopy, Agnes crawled to a decaying wooden cabin nearly 6 miles through the forest from Broken Ridge. And it was there that fate led her to the one man the town had forgotten. Beavis Nelson, 56 years old, black, a former civil rights investigator with the Lucasville Police Department, a man who had once exposed internal files tied to racial violence, but had been fired, had his pension revoked, and had his life threatened 21 years ago. Beavis lived off-grid in the woods, growing his vegetables, cooking his meals, and using power from solar panels. He had believed his life was long over. But when he saw Agnes collapse on his porch, covered in blood, lips cracked, eyes still burning with determination, he knew the past wasn't finished. He carried her inside, gently disinfected her wounds with boiled mint root water. He stitched the gash on her leg using leftover surgical thread from his days in the state's rapid response team. Agnes woke up 3 hours later. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. The first thing she asked was, "Can you help me bring the truth to light?" Beavis froze. Because those eyes burning and restrained, he had seen them before. They were the eyes of her mother, Diana Harper, the woman who once helped him expose the murder cover-up by 3 white officers in Tyler, 2003. He sat down, his hands trembling with emotion. "You're Diana's daughter." Agnes nodded. "And I'm the only one left who can finish what she didn't get to." Beavis sat in silence. After 2 decades buried by fear and betrayal, a girl who had just clawed her way back from the edge of death had come to reignite an unfinished war for justice. This was no longer just a kidnapping. It was a historical loop, where one generation met another to rewrite justice with blood, intellect, and survival. When Agnes woke the next morning, Beavis handed her a rusted iron box, something he had hidden in a secret wall for over 15 years. Inside was the file Diana Harper, her mother, had sent Beavis in March 2007, just weeks before she was declared a suicide. Agnes's hands shook as she opened the yellowed pages. The ink faded, but still legible enough to read familiar names. Clayburn, Judge E. Wallace, Interim Sheriff J. Carr. They were all named in the 37-page report titled SRC-17, Internal Operational Links Between Law Enforcement and the Sovereign Red Cross. Beavis spoke, his voice strained. "Your mom didn't die because she investigated the wrong person. She died because she hit the heart of the system." In 2007, Diana Harper served as legal counsel for the Texas Human Rights Commission. She had uncovered a series of abuses in Lucasville, from illegal asset seizures to cover-ups of black civilian deaths. And during that process, she discovered SRC-17, an internal code used to reference the Sovereign Red Cross, an extremist group that funded white authorities in southern towns to preserve an unspoken law system against people of color. Clayburn, then just a lieutenant, was one of their beneficiaries, receiving SRC funding to maintain control over the police, judiciary, and local media. The original report had been pulled from Diana's files after her death. Her law office burned in a mysterious fire, and Beavis's copy had nearly been destroyed in a break-in attempt at his cabin in 2008. Agnes gripped the report, her eyes red, but her voice firm. "He didn't just kill my mother. He killed the truth." Beavis nodded, voice hoarse. "Now it's your turn to survive for that truth." Instead of hiding, Agnes did the unthinkable. She turned the old cabin into a covert signal station. With Beavis's help, himself once a technical data investigation specialist, they built a hidden website called shadowledger.net. There, they began uploading segments of the documents, audio recordings from 2007 capturing conversations between Clayburn and an SRC official, photographs of maps outlining SRC-controlled soft zones, testimony from an anonymous witness, a former court clerk who had seen records in Diana Harper's case altered. Within 6 hours, the site had over 20,000 anonymous hits from states like California, Illinois, and New York. Agnes used encrypted email to contact 17 major newsrooms, 4 human rights organizations, and 2 independent YouTube investigative channels, including one that had exposed prison abuse in Louisiana in 2023. By 5:42 p.m. that same day, on Twitter, X, the hashtags number Justice for Agnes and number Harper Files rocketed into the national top 5 trending topics. Clayburn, watching everything from his office, began sweating under his collar. He fumbled to call Elias, his voice cracking. "We've got a problem, a big one." But what scared him most wasn't the hashtags or the media. It was a photo just leaked on Shadow Ledger, an image of Clayburn holding a beer, seated beside a symbol of the Sovereign Red Cross at a private meeting in 2012. He knew. The past had awakened, and it was demanding blood. On June 10th, the town of Lucasville was no longer a peaceful place. It had become the eye of a national storm. Every frame of the video of Agnes speaking at her graduation, followed by her disappearance, had been edited and circulated at a staggering rate, over 40,000 shares per hour. The hashtag number Justice for Agnes surpassed 12.4 million mentions in just 48 hours. Sheriff Archie Clayburn, the man who once smirked in the crowd, suddenly became the center of suspicion, and he began to respond like a man spiraling out of control. 7 police vehicles set up blockades on every road leading into town. A verbal order was issued. No reporters, no media, no filming allowed. At a small coffee shop on Monroe Street, a young man named Derek Winlow was immediately arrested while live-streaming footage of military vehicles putting up barriers near the post office. The charge: disturbing public order. Within 24 hours, 3 local Facebook accounts were deactivated, and 5 TikTok channels had their videos removed for sensitive content, raising suspicions of covert interference by local security units. Residents were threatened with civil fines if they spoke to the press. An elderly woman whispered while receiving her ration at the supermarket, "They think silencing us will bury the truth again." But history would not repeat itself, because this time, the truth had wings. And a father was ready to tear through the system to reclaim justice for his daughter. June 11th, 7:14 a.m. The roar of helicopter blades shattered the sky over Lucasville. A Bell 429 helicopter bearing the seal of the FBI Federal Command landed squarely in the middle of Lucasville High School Stadium, the very place where Agnes had once delivered her graduation speech. The helicopter door opened. Brian Harper, the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, stepped out. A sharply tailored black suit, dark sunglasses, a face as stern as granite, and in his hand, a file marked with the seal, Top Secret, Reactivation Order. He didn't smile, he didn't wave. He simply took the microphone and declared before over 2,000 residents gathered around the stadium, "I am here not only as a father, I am here as the person responsible for upholding the law of this nation. Lucasville is now under federal investigation." He announced a full-scale investigation into the administrative and judicial system of Lucasville, including the police force, the local courts, networks linked to the Sovereign Red Cross, SRC, and every individual listed in Diana Harper's 2007 files. As soon as the speech ended, from the far side of the stadium, Agnes Happer appeared for the first time in public. Her legs still trembled, scars still visible on her arms, but her head was held high. In that moment, cameras from over 40 major news outlets fired non-stop. A black girl once thrown off a cliff was now standing beside her father, the FBI director, demanding the truth for her mother, for herself, and an entire forgotten community. Agnes didn't have to shout. She simply said one sentence that silenced the entire stadium. "I am Agnes Happer. I survived. And this time, no one will be silenced." A tidal wave crashed against the system Clayburn once believed untouchable. But Clayburn didn't flee. He stepped out of the police station, drew his pistol from its holster, looked up at the helicopter and growled, "If they want war, they'll get war." On June 12th, at 10:08 a.m., downtown Lucasville was more crowded than it had ever been. City Hall, once the symbol of local control, had become a federal press briefing center. packed with dozens of live streaming cameras, international journalists, and hundreds of townspeople holding signs. We stand with Agnes. Justice, not silence. No more broken ridges. At the podium stood FBI Director Brian Harper. Beside him, his daughter, Agnes Harper, the survivor who had returned from the abyss, now standing before the nation. She wore a white button-up shirt, her left arm still bandaged, but her eyes stared straight ahead, unflinching. In her 6-minute speech, Agnes declared, "I do not stand for hatred. I am the voice of those who were silenced, those who were hidden. And today, I want everyone to know, justice does not retreat from violence." But just as applause began to echo, a flash of metal gleamed from the western rooftop across from City Hall. A Remington 700 telescopic rifle, legendary among U.S. military snipers, was being adjusted by a masked gunman wearing camouflage, his identifying patches ripped off. The shot rang out. Hundreds screamed in terror. Live streams from CNN, MSNBC, YOUTUBE, and TWITTER captured the moment a bullet sliced through the air, heading straight for Agnes. And at that very instant, Beavis Nelson, 56 years old, the ex-cop abandoned by the system, sprang from backstage. He took the bullet with his own body. The round pierced his shoulder, blood spraying across the stage. Agnes screamed. FBI agents pulled her down behind the podium. Broadcasts went dark for 3 seconds, but the world had already seen the public assassination attempt. 6 minutes later, SWAT teams locked down the entire government district, sealed all routes, and helicopters circled overhead. The gunman was captured alive. His name was Cameron Price, 33, a former soldier trained at Hilford Base, discharged for extremist behavior. Under interrogation pressure, he confessed. Clayburn gave the order. He said, "It was for the honor of the town, that we couldn't be humiliated by some black girl. He told me if I succeeded, I'd have a place in SRC. I was just the tool. The real orchestrator was him." In Price's backpack, the FBI found a hand-drawn map marking the forest area of Broken Ridge, suspected storage site of Sovereign Red Cross documents, a dossier of fake IDs, passports, and SIM cards from multiple carriers, evidence of underground support, a torn photograph, Clayburn shaking hands with a silver-haired man, behind them the Red Cross logo, SRC's emblem. The press conference became a crime scene. But amid the chaos, Agnes did not cry. She stood. Blood from Beavis still stained her sleeve. She spoke firmly to the cameras. "I was thrown from a cliff. I did not fall. And no bullet will ever end the truth." At 1:17 a.m. on the night of June 13th, the FBI's intelligence network in northern Texas suddenly received a live tracking signal emitted from a GX Micro 9 spy chip, smaller than a pinhead, that Agnes had secretly planted under the driver's seat of Clayburn's old SUV before her abduction. The signal led the rapid response team to Raven Hollow, a location believed to have been abandoned since 1982 following a massive forest fire. But newly processed satellite imagery, enhanced with AI, revealed inconsistent heat patterns, truck tire tracks entering but not exiting, clear signs of an active underground facility. At 2:40 a.m., a 14-member federal task force, equipped with thermal drones, light armor, and infrared flashlights, approached a moss-covered wooden warehouse deep in the forest. Behind the structure, technicians discovered a concealed underground door, camouflaged with cement and dry roots. After 12 minutes of probing, the team uncovered a tunnel over 500 meters long, stone-paved, with a crude ventilation system, leading to what the FBI would later label the Vault of Hate. Inside, flashlight beams swept across vaults holding original SRC records. What they found left the entire team in stunned silence. 62 execution photographs bearing SRC seals, each accompanied by a blood oath. A list of 147 active SRC members, including judges, mayors, and former police chiefs across 8 southern states. Audio recordings, including one capturing the clandestine trial of Agnes's mother, Agnes Happer, who was convicted of soiling town tradition for exposing police corruption. Her voice screamed, "My daughter will never kneel before you," before being cut off by a chilling reply, "Enough." A raid order was issued at exactly 3:42 a.m. Beavis Nelson, now acting as field advisor, present in the command vehicle, was the first to confirm. "This is the place Diana was investigating. Lock down every route. Clayburn doesn't leave." At that moment, Clayburn was hiding in a sub-command room about 70 meters from the main vault, with a secondary exit leading to the hillside. When the FBI team breached the facility, Clayburn threw smoke grenades and returned fire with a Glock 17, hitting no one. While fleeing through the escape tunnel, he triggered a motion sensor installed by the FBI tech unit. The system auto-locked the hatch, dual electronic seals, completely sealing the exit. Through the earpieces of the Special Ops team, Beavis's voice rang out cold and clear. "Last time, I wasn't fast enough to stop you. This time, you're not getting away, Clayburn." The rapid response force closed in. Clayburn was subdued after a 6-minute chase through the darkness. He was forced to his knees, handcuffed on the cold dirt floor, surrounded by flickering flashlight beams, like the truth itself being laid bare. When asked for final words before being taken in, Clayburn shouted, "You think you've won? One day, you black folks will go back to being silent." His voice echoed in the darkness, but was immediately silenced by a federal agent pressing black duct tape over his mouth. Agnes wasn't present that night, but at 6 a.m. the next morning, after reviewing the full footage from the command unit, she spoke only one sentence. "Mom, I've found where you disappeared, and I've sealed it shut forever." On June 19th, under the blazing Texas sun, a convoy of FBI-flagged vehicles, armored federal trucks, and nearly 80 reporters from national outlets pulled up along the red dirt road leading to Broken Ridge, a place once spoken of only in whispers. Agnes Happer, 18, the lone survivor of a hate-driven assassination attempt, had made a request that left officials speechless. "I want him, Sheriff Archie Clayburn, to return to the very place he thought I would die." Clayburn, handcuffed, wearing a bulletproof vest, flanked by 2 armed agents, was dragged out of a van into a crowd cloaked in silence. The man who once ruled this town, who issued orders to detain, torture, and threaten, now bowed his head in daylight, forced to witness the rise of the very victim he once tried to erase. Winds howled atop Broken Ridge. The ground was dry and brittle. The branch that once broke Agnes's fall remained rotted with time, but its roots etched with memory. Agnes said nothing for 30 seconds. She simply stepped to the cliff's edge, where the marks of her fall and the scraped earth still scarred the rough stone. She turned and pointed down into the abyss. "I fell from here, and I climbed back up, not just with my body, but with the memory of my mother, with the pain of all those who fell and were never known." Clayburn said nothing. His head hung low, not in remorse, but in the bitter knowledge that history was sealing his last exit. Behind Agnes stood Beavis Nelson, his shoulder still bandaged, but his face calm. He didn't speak. He looked at her with the eyes of someone who had seen light after hell. A photographer captured the moment. 2 generations, 1 survivor, 1 witness, standing together at what had once been an endpoint. Agnes knelt and pulled from her pocket a small wooden cross, hand-carved with the inscription, for those who didn't return. She planted it in the earth, 1 meter from the cliff's edge, so no one else would ever have to stand that close to death again. That same afternoon, the live stream of the return surpassed 2.7 million views in just 6 hours. On social media, the hashtag #sign, return to the cliff #sign, 2 nationwide, second only to a White House announcement. The Federal Bureau of Investigation formally declared Broken Ridge a secured site under 24/7 surveillance, officially recognized as a federal hate crime investigation zone. A bronze plaque was installed at the base of the cliff, reading, "Where silence once ruled." Now justice is heard. For the people of Lucasville, this place had once symbolized the power of the oppressor. Now it stood as a monument to the forgotten, the buried voices, and the truth that refuses to die. Agnes stood still, the wind sweeping her hair skyward toward the Texas sky. She was no longer just a valedictorian, not just the daughter of the FBI director. She was the reminder that no one can throw justice off a cliff without being swallowed by the abyss themselves. No one stands above the law, and no black girl shall ever be forced into silence again. On June 27th, the early morning sunlight poured through the dome of the Dallas Federal Courthouse, a place that had seen major trials, but none as seismic as this one. The case name, United States versus Archie Clayburn and 17 defendants. Outside the courthouse was a sea of people, hundreds from southern states, especially the black community, gathered with signs, images of Agnes, and chants. We haven't forgotten, and this time, we are watching. Agnes Happer sat in the front row, next to her father, Brian Harper, director of the FBI, his face composed, but his hand gripped hers tightly in silent strength. Behind them sat Beavis Nelson, with a worn jacket, steely eyes, and civil rights attorneys from the ACLU, NAACP, and Southern Justice Alliance. From the opening session, the federal prosecutor declared, "This is not just the trial of one man. It is the trial of a system that enabled atrocities for more than a generation." Beavis Nelson was the first witness. He stood tall, voice calm, and detailed how the SRC had embedded itself into the local justice system for over 15 years. From police recruitment and judge appointments to record tampering and shutting down investigations. All classified files recovered from the Raven Hollow Vault. 2,394 pages of documents, 83 audio recordings, 47 internal surveillance vide, OS including scenes of torture, expulsion, and planned assassinations, were presented in court. No one in the room remained unmoved. Clayburn faced 19 federal charges, including first-degree attempted murder, domestic terrorism conspiracy under the Patriot Act, Civil Rights Act of 1964 violations, organization and execution of systemic racial discrimination, federal evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and several additional felonies. Ronnie and Elias, the 2 officers who had kidnapped and tied up Agnes on the night of June 7th, pleaded guilty and requested leniency, agreeing to testify against Clayburn. The entire courtroom fell silent when Elias wept. "I can't believe I ever did that to an 18-year-old girl. But I won't stay silent to protect evil anymore." When it was Agnes's turn to take the stand, every camera turned toward her. No dramatics, no anger, just a voice, unnervingly calm. "I was once labeled a worthless black girl, but I'm not here today for revenge. I'm here to end the silence that killed my mother, and nearly killed me." The courtroom stood in a wave of applause. The jury didn't take long. After 4 hours of deliberation, they returned, and the foreperson read aloud. Defendant Archie Clayburn. Verdict: guilty. Sentence: life imprisonment without parole. As the sentence was delivered, Clayburn collapsed, his head bowed on the bench. No longer a proud sheriff, no longer the shadowy overlord of Lucasville, just a man undone, exposed before the nation. Outside, the crowd erupted. Agnes emerged into the sunlight, her face glowing, her gaze lifted skyward. Not for victory, but because justice had finally spoken. 3 months after the historic trial, the name Agnes Happer no longer belonged solely to a survivor. It had become a living symbol of a new America, where justice was no longer a privilege, but a promise that must never be broken. On September 14th, Agnes was officially appointed Honorary Ambassador of Safe Daughters, a national organization dedicated to protecting victims of racial and gender-based violence. At the ceremony, she addressed over 1,200 attendees in Washington, D.C. I didn't survive to tell my story. I survived to make room for those who've never been heard. Just a week later, Agnes was invited to speak at Howard University, the nation's most historic Black university, in front of thousands of students, professors, and journalists. The speech, titled, "It's Not Your Skin, It's the Light You Carry," quickly went viral, amassing over 6.8 million YouTube views within 72 hours, and was named one of the year's top 10 most inspiring speeches by Time magazine. In response to public pressure and inspired by the Agnes case, the U.S. Department of Justice announced a federal initiative, the Clifflight Project. The program would review over 18,000 concealed racial discrimination cases in local police departments, from Texas to Mississippi, Florida to Missouri. The Attorney General declared, "If an 18-year-old girl can make the system listen, then we have no excuse to remain silent." Though offered candidacy by all 3 major political parties to run for the Texas House of Representatives, Agnes declined. "I'm not ready to sit in a seat of power," she told the press. "I want to work where truth is told. One story, one person, one unhealed wound at a time." Instead of becoming a politician, Agnes wrote a book titled From the Fall, recounting the full journey from her fateful graduation to the edge of Broken Ridge. The book became a bestseller within 9 days of release, was translated into 14 languages, and took her around the globe on a lecture tour about justice, courage, and human rights. Beavis Nelson, once exiled by the system, was restored to honor at an FBI ceremony in Quantico. He was awarded the Civil Courage Medal with the citation, "Not everyone dares to confront darkness, but Beavis did, for a girl and a future." Brian Harper, after nearly 4 decades in service, announced his retirement to spend the rest of his life beside his daughter. At his farewell, he said, "I used to think I was protecting America, but then I realized I needed to protect a girl so she could protect America." During a year-end gathering in New Orleans, a shy 9-year-old girl approached Agnes and asked, "Can I be FBI director someday?" Agnes smiled, bent down, took the child's hand, and answered with a line that would later be printed on millions of posters. "Not only, you must." The video closes with a sweeping aerial shot. Agnes standing at the edge of Broken Ridge, once a burial ground of hope, now a monument to freedom. The American flag flutters behind her, sunlight resting on her shoulders as her voice echoes in the final recording. "I didn't fall to disappear. I fell to rise, and no one else needs to fall again." I hope you enjoyed this story. Like the video and subscribe so you won't miss what's next.